What's going on, folks? Nate here at Tool Dyno Works, and today I'm going to walk you through a little diagnostic adventure I had this afternoon with this 2020 ZX6 that I've got here on the dyno behind me. Now, obviously, we've got the tail torn apart so we can get to the ECU just to grab a tack signal there with our inductive pickup. This bike has an M4 slip-on exhaust system, and the customer had quite a few complaints with the bike. Now, the customer's complaints, even before we've ever even seen this thing before now, was that it just felt slow and kind of ran like crap. Well, okay. You've got an M4 slip-on the bike, you've got a stock ECU, go and get a flash, should feel quite a bit better, notice a pretty significant improvement. You say you didn't. And my answer to that, back at the start of the summer, was, well, that's bizarre, because there is a huge improvement to be had with proper mapping in the bike, but there's not a lot I can help you with without seeing it. So he went ahead and actually took it to his local dealer, just because they were closer than we are to where he lives. The dealer had this bike for something like a month, and couldn't figure out anything wrong with it, and all they could do was blame the ECU flash that we had done for him, and say put it back to stock. So I did. I also told him that nothing's wrong with the flash. I flashed hundreds of these things, literally hundreds of 19 to 23 ZX6s with slip-ons, but whatever, I'll flash back to stock for you, it doesn't matter to me. Brought the ECU back to the dealership, and plugged it in, and they said, oh yeah, you know, it's got to be good to go now, it's all stock. And it wasn't. Bike still rode like crap, felt like shit. So I finally said, hey man, why don't you just stop, dicking around, bring me the bike, I'll run it for you, and tell you what's going on. So he did. And that is what our baseline run looked like on the dyno. This ZX6 makes 60 horsepower and 30 foot-pounds of torque, with a torque curve and power curve that looks absolutely like, well, dog shit. And I'll be honest with you, I knew that's exactly what it was going to look like, because the second I rolled the thing up on the dyno, and I took a look at the exhaust system, I knew what he had done, and I knew what happened. Now, we've seen this failure many times before on many bikes over the years, but from the outside, nothing looks wrong with the system whatsoever. When I looked down the tailpipe, though, and I found this baffle installed in the slip-on, I was pretty much anticipating exactly the performance that we saw out of the bike. When you have any higher performance inline four, whether it's a 600 or a Super Sport or a 1000, whatever it is, they need every bit of exhaust diameter to be able to actually get the exhaust gas out of the engine and out the tailpipe. You are doing nothing but creating a restriction by installing a baffle with just some perforated holes on the side that's effectively necking down the outlet diameter to less than half of the stock exhaust outlet diameter. So I went ahead and pulled the baffle out and reran it, and I will go ahead and show you now what the performance looks like once the baffle's been removed. You can see there we picked up some power, but 75 horsepower is still laughable for a ZX6, and the air fuel, again with bone stock mapping in place, is almost off the charts rich. It actually is off the charts at about 10,000 RPMs, but you can see it's way rich of our fuel target that we'd like to see on these bikes. It's actually so rich that it has burned up the catalytic converter. The catalytic converter in the ZX6s is in the stock headers, and this catalytic converter is completely clogged. It's actually not broken, which kind of surprised me, but it's completely clogged, and the plugs are now completely fouled, which is why it's actually misfiring. It's a rich misfire, and we're making, gosh, carry the two, 50 horsepower less than it should be making, with proper mapping in place and this M4 slip-on installed. And there is no fixing that. Once the catalytic converter has melted down in there, it's done. It's dead. There's nothing that can be done to fix that other than just removing the catalyst material entirely, which then honestly leaves you with an exhaust system that sounds terrible because you have this big open resonator essentially before the slip-on, or you just install a full aftermarket set of headers. And that's exactly what my recommendation is to this customer. I'm going to go ahead and talk to M4 tomorrow and see what individual pieces we need and what pricing looks like to go ahead and get him a set of their headers to match this M4 slip-on. But that's essentially the solution, is once the cat is clogged, it's dead, there's nothing you can do about it. And headers are probably, off the top of my head, like $800 from M4 with all the other parts that we're going to need in shipping. So it's an expensive mistake to make, because had he asked if he should ever put the baffle in this exhaust, my answer would have been absolutely not. Now, a lot of people are probably wondering, well, shit, I've got a baffle in my exhaust, or I see guys with baffles in their exhaust systems all the time, and we don't see this issue pop up. Well, under regular riding conditions, you might not. It's still going to run rich, and you're just going to be slow, but you're not going to generate enough heat in the catalytic converter to actually cause it to melt down and start to just essentially clog up the exhaust flow. This guy, on the other hand, has not been doing regular street riding. The rear tire here doesn't exactly have chicken strips left. He's used every ounce of these S22s, which tells me that this thing has seen a track day. Or 2, or 5. And riding one of these bikes on the track with this in your slip-on and the stock catalytic converter still in place probably made the cat temps hit 1200, 1400 degrees before the heavy metals in the catalyst material finally just started to collapse and melt in on itself and create a giant plug in your exhaust system. And then you end up with a ZX6 that makes less power than an FZ07. And again, this will occur with bone stock mapping in the ECU if you go ahead and put one of these slip-ons in these bikes, or again, any inline 4 with a slip-on and a stock catalytic converter still in place, if you go take them out to the track. They just can't handle that much of an exhaust restriction that you've now installed on the bike by putting a slip-on on there that's designed to improve exhaust flow, but then necking it down massively with a baffle. It just won't work. And the problem gets even worse when you have a tuner flash the ECU for a slip-on, which requires more fuel than the stock setup does. And then you put that baffle in there because now you have an even larger and more restrictive exhaust system, but more fuel on top of it. So please don't make this same mistake. If you're going to put any sort of aftermarket exhaust system on your bike, talk to your tuner. You should have a tuner because you can't just throw these things on there without either getting a servo buddy to keep the check engine light off or getting some kind of piggyback controller to dial in the fueling now that you've changed the exhaust flow, or better yet, just don't do any of that and get the ECU flashed, but you have to let us know what specific pipe you have on the bike and if you're going to be running a baffle, because then we're going to stop you and have a conversation. I must answer somewhere between 50 and 150 questions, just like the one that I wish this guy would have asked every single day. And I don't mind doing it, because I want your bikes to run better and I want them to run properly, especially with our custom mapping in place. So if you have any questions about getting your ZX6, your ZX10, your Kawasaki, your Yamaha, doesn't matter. Any of the bikes that we offer tuning support for, do not hesitate to ask. Email us at support@twolddynoworks.com. We're always happy to help and we'll get you the correct information. That's all I've got time for today, folks. Thank you all for watching. If you do happen to enjoy this video or this content, I haven't ever asked for this before, but please do hit the like button, subscribe. It does help us out here at the shop, and we hope to be able to have the time this off-season to use this channel more and more to share information exactly like this with you folks, and those likes and subscribes definitely help.